This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. Joan and Janet are subtle energy empaths who navigate consciousness. Their passion is to support you in your evolution. As consciousness, we are all one. One mind, one heart, free of all limitations. Experience this reality with us and discover how it can make a difference in your daily living. Join us in a state of grace as we explore, with warmth and humor, this thing we call life. Now, here are Joan Newcomb and Janet Barrett.
Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. We're your co-hosts, Joan Newcomb coming to you from Tacoma, Washington, and Janet Barrett is coming to you from Portland, Oregon.
Hello, everyone. How nice to be with you again today.
We have a really interesting show for you today. We are talking about, well, actually, basically, we're asking the question, is life a slap in the face or a gentle caress of awareness? I mean, life can just seem sometimes like a big slap in the face, but it could also seem like a gentle caress. It all depends on how we relate to ourselves and others, and we can either resist or accept what's going on. So join us as we explore, as consciousness, our opportunities to feel differently, to think differently, and to respond differently.
Powerful stuff today, Joan.
Yeah.
Well, it's always powerful, but this will be interesting. So join us here on our show live, or you can join us at any other time on our podcast. But you can always reach us through our radio website, which is www.Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And there you're going to find out Joan's website info, my website info, our blogs we both write each week. You'll see all the podcasts that we've done in the past. You'll get all the connections and links to Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and how Joan and I, about our schedules for meetups we each do local to our areas, and also about how we work with clients individually and collectively with our clients. So lots to find out there. Check it out for us. And you're going to find a free offer. Tell them what that offer is, Joan.
It's a surprise. No, actually.
It's a surprise.
Well, it will be.
Yeah.
So your free offer is if you go to the website and sign up for our announcements, you can get a free offer that's both from Janet and also for me. And Janet, your offer is 10 top tips for enjoying life, which is more like 27, right?
No, that was before. I cut it down.
Oh, what's the new offer?
I think it's 13.
Oh, you've restrained yourself.
Yeah, really. That was my mood. What could I say?
Right. Yeah, and mine is a special technique for navigating life because of all the things that are going on. Mine's a YouTube video, training video on how to do that. So go and find it on our website, ConsciousConversationsWithJoanandJanet.com. And Janet mentioned that you can also find connections to Twitter, our Facebook pages, our links to our YouTube channels, because the show has a YouTube channel and I have a YouTube channel. And then also information about our meetups. And I have coming up a very special meetup this Saturday. Wrong. It's this Sunday, August 26th. What day is it today?
Yeah, really.
Okay, it's Sunday, August 26th at the Cutters Point Coffee Meeting Room. It's rediscover your purpose and regain your passion. So it's a very specific focus on how to rediscover what your purpose is nowadays, because we are going through such a consciousness shift with our identities that we're forgetting who we are and why we're here. And really it's upgrading and expanding an awareness of who we are and why we are here. So the workshop is going to help you do that. And that is this Sunday, August 26th from 2:15 to 4:15 at Cutters Point Coffee on Pearl Street in Tacoma. That's only $10 to cover the time and expenses. And then there's a free meetup on the Saturday, September 8th. And that's at the Wheelock Library in Tacoma. Once a month I do it there. Saturday, September 8th at 3:30. The week after that, I'm at the University Place. And then the week after that is Expo in Kent, and I will tell you more about that later on in the show. So,
can you
are we
believe
slapping or
September?
pressing? No,
Yeah,
it's not yet.
We're doing both. My gosh, what a summer. So my groups, I have new groups that I'm hosting, facilitating using Zoom video conferencing. So it's live interactive. It's just like being one-on-one with me as in our groups, which I forgot to tell you. I have groups here each week in my home, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we just explore life. And those are consciousness playgrounds, consciousness conversations. There's all kinds of good things that we do in there about seeing what's going on in our lives and how to enjoy what's going on in our lives, which can be a challenge. So, what do we know about life, Joan? How it can be both a slap and a gentle caress sometimes. That's kind of what the summer's been about, isn't it?
Well, I will have to say that if I'm experiencing it as a slap, I'm resisting what's coming at me.
A good point.
I had an experience last week where we were at a restaurant. My husband and I were enjoying a really lovely meal. It's one of our favorite restaurants, and they came over and they wanted to roll up the windows beside us. And we were the only ones along that wall, so I asked if they could wait till we finished eating. I mean, they had just watched one of the waitresses clean all the ash off the windowsills out there, and plus it's right on a busy street, and I just really wanted to wait. I wanted to wait till I finished eating. So they left, but 15 minutes later, I don't know whether she was the owner or the maitre d', but she was pretty pushy about it. She's like, "This is our advertising." And I was like, "Well, we're almost done eating. Can we wait?" And she said something to the waitress like, "Well, we wouldn't seat them there if they had, if they'd said that before or something." It was just, the whole experience was really shocking and unpleasant. And instead of realizing that it had more to do with them, because they're concerned about advertising to, nobody was walking on the street because of the air quality, for one thing. Their biggest advertising is how they treat their, the their customers that are actually sitting in there, So, but I took it personally, and so we left without dessert, which was a big disappointment. And it's no longer one of our favorite restaurants. I don't feel like going back. And I'm sitting here reciting this there, and it's just, I feel all the hurt feelings, and it was a real slap in the face. And, at another time, I would not have reacted that way. It wouldn't have necessarily been a caress, but it would have rolled off my back. So it was resistance to something, and it was shock and surprise and stuff like that.
I think we want to be very clear with people too, that a slap of awareness is not necessarily violence. It can come across as that, but it's kind of like with a newborn baby. You know how a doctor or midwife, whoever's attending, will slap the child to get it to breathe. It changes the state that it's in. It's not as an act intending to hurt or harm. And we want to be very clear about that, because a lot of people can be triggered by language and things like that. And that is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about now sometimes, like Joan was just describing, was her shock she felt about it was unexpected, and she was in a certain mindset, and this brought up a different mindset. And so we can have a tendency to go, what? Just a minute. That's the whole point of shock, is, something catches you differently. And so it's how our fluidity is about changing gears sometimes. And so we're not judging this, but what we have been noticing through society and this consciousness upheaval, I don't know if that's a word, in the last few years certainly, and the intensity that this summer has brought to things, that how you have your rule set about how you are in your life. Do things come easily to you? Is there more intensity about making changes and shifts? And it's just everybody's reference is going to relate to this a little differently. So we want to appreciate all those perspectives, but I think you can see that or hear that it's nice. It always seems to be nicer when it's just a gentle flow and, and there's the awareness, as opposed to, that was a little abrupt. And and there's the awareness. So anyway, just wanted to make sure that was clear for our audience.
Yeah, I don't think they slap babies on the butt when they're born anymore, but they certainly did.
They do
You and I were born, so. Right.
Yeah, really. Well, it sets you up, right?
Right. Yeah, and it really does. And we have a different perception in the world nowadays. Most of us don't believe in spanking anymore or anything like that.
Right.
But life does certainly, there can be shocking events, and we do have an opportunity to view it differently, experience it differently. Yeah. So we will be talking more about that when we come right back, but we are sliding into the first break here. We have to take a commercial break right now, but stay tuned because we'll be talking more about, is life a slap in the face or a gentle caress of awareness when we come right back.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye. Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet, and we are talking about, is life a slap in the face or a gentle caress of awareness?
I think we're kind of talking about how we engage different states of reality, don't you think, Joan?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, so when we were talking about all of this before, we were noticing how events happen, and so you're in a car accident or the bridge goes out and you can't go home that way. That's when sometimes you get, things are different right in this moment, and I have to be resourceful, and I can either sit here or I can figure out another way to go, or you go into a state of shock and you're having a different experience than you would in your whatever you call your normal reality. those things are real and happen to us all the time. And it's, or it can be just when you fall in love, right? That's that, oh, that feels nice. Kind of like sitting in a hot tub when you're achy and how it just kind of seeps out of you. There's all these different ways that stuff happens to us in everyday life. And we're just looking at how, if there's patterns in there that dictate, the habituated response that's creating more of the same, which is what habits do, or if there are places that as consciousness we know that it's all about potential and that into any pattern can be introduced potential released and the pattern will change, fall apart, do something different, or take itself into a new way. And that's what we appreciate about consciousness technologies and how quickly stuff can be different. So.
Yeah, and I have completely different words for probably the same thing, but for me it's noticing how I respond to things and from what perspective I respond to things. So like I said, if it feels like a slap in the face, I'm resisting.
Yeah.
And if I'm experiencing life as my body personality, I will feel like things are coming at me that are out of my control. And I will feel like I'm the victim of something. Yeah, I felt victimized by the maitre d' at that restaurant. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. And that definitely is not who I am as essence. And as essence, I am consciousness. I am greater consciousness manifesting through forms. I'm not my body. I have a body. And my body reacts like things are coming at me, but I'm the driver. So, as the driver of this experience, I can respond differently. So, if you're driving your car down the freeway and, a piece of debris rolls across the freeway, you're not going to let go of the wheels and go, oh my God, this debris is coming at me. You're probably going to do some evasive maneuvers. Mm-hmm. So, life, now we all talk about, life being enjoyable, and I know that life is much more enjoyable when I'm navigating it as greater consciousness. And less debris shows up on my freeway. Mm-hmm. because I'm navigating from greater consciousness.
Well, and this is all degrees of our language and how our humor about ourselves and the world, right? Because, there's nothing enjoyable about half the things that we go through. We go, no, that hurt, or I don't like that, or whatever. We have some kind of reaction, and whether it's to the degree of resistance or however deep in the trigger is. And then you go, how is this enjoyable? Well, it's on the level of subtlety right off the bat. And you go, this is just more experience of some type. And what do I want to do with that awareness? And so it engages me as consciousness to help my sense of self to navigate in a less rigid world. The world is rigid because we have time and space in it, and those set up limits and principles and dynamics and stuff. And when you start to live as consciousness, you start to get more of a flow going. There's a wiggle room, there's a softness between this moment and the next moment, and everything just starts to ripple a little differently. And I see it all the time. I feel it all the time. Those of us who do this work, that's the way what happens with life. It just gets a little softer and wiggle room. And so I can find an enjoyment is not necessarily just a state of joy, but I would think if I was really in a state of enlightenment, I would so welcome that experience on one level, because it's another moment of being, and we're very tuned to comfort and discomfort. And I gotta say that I think a lot of consciousness and self hangs out in discomfort. And so I'm not going to judge that experience anymore. I'm going to just say this is an experience. It's different, feels different than the other one. So my attachment to how I experience myself in my world starts to shift. So, that's my 2 cents about it.
Boy, inflation has really raised the size of 2 cents, man. But one of the points of the many points that you just made was about how greater consciousness would welcome it, and there is definitely a different perspective of navigating life here in density and effort from greater consciousness. So I used to describe it as the more capable of us create the more challenging lifetimes. Mm-hmm. Because if you view this entire world as like a Disneyland, an adventure and density and effort, the kiddie pool and the kiddie pond or the kiddie area is a lot more elemental and not as challenging, but there are definitely areas which is it's not really a Disneyland analogy, I realize now, but there are other people who are going to find enjoyment by, rappelling down mountains or scaling rock climbing. I'm trying to think of something that's challenging and dangerous, is rock climbing. And some of us, our idea of roughing it is staying in a motel without room service. But it's an understanding that if you've got a lot of stuff that appears to be coming at you, and if you're experiencing a lot of challenges, it's because you are really capable as consciousness, and that greater aspect of you is enjoying it.
Well, and on a certain level, it's our creativity at play. Right. And our creativity doesn't really care. I think we have to get out of the human reference. The human is very invested in survival and how it feels and what it thinks, and because it needs guidelines, right? And it probably needs more than guidelines. It needs its judgments, keeps it safe and whole. But one person's definition of safe and whole is going to be different for the other person. And it's, what comes to mind is our sense of how we operate in our world. Whoa, there's just a whole bunch of thought that just jumped in on there. Part of what was coming up is, okay, where this takes place, I don't know. It'll probably become clear, I suppose. Yesterday my husband and I were driving somewhere, and he was driving for me, or I was letting him drive, or, every time we get in the car, it's like, you want to drive? Fine. Okay. And we both knew where we were going. And I have a way that I get there. Well, my husband was like, he didn't care, right? And he said it, and we both knew where to get to, but we had 2 different approaches to get there. And when I'm asking him and trying to understand my own experience that I was having in that moment, I was taken with, and am always taken with, the way we get someplace because of what I notice and experience getting there. My husband doesn't work that way. He just wants to get there. He doesn't really care if he's driving through the desert or whether it's green trees everywhere. I'm going to pick one over the other. And I'm like, now just a minute. You're right. I too am right. And I'm right and we're each right in our realities. Neither one of us is wrong, but in our state of reference and how we engage in life, we were both right. And so what happens when you're both right and nobody's wrong? And how you appreciate that other person in their perspective, you can have a conversation that you would have otherwise, hurt feelings and some kind of resistance and some kind of whatever. And I thought it was a very gentle way to experience awareness. Actually, that's what that was about. Yeah. What if there's 2 rights? What happens to that whole scenario of right and wrong? And that's the way we engage the world.
Well, you're right. You're right. And I'm right. And we have different ways to be.
Yeah.
But yes, because we're all experiencing this reality through our own filters, through our own perspectives. We're all having, we're having parallel experiences, but every experience is different. So, your husband's way of driving is right, and your way of, for him, and your way of driving is right for you. And I've had that identical thing with driving with my husband, who will also have two GPSs going on, and my GPS will be the right one, but he won't be listening to it. So, but it makes me realize that everybody has their own version of reality and their own interpretation of reality as well. So we make it more difficult on ourselves when we want everybody else to experience reality the same way we do.
Well, and I think another part of this was as we continued on the drive, or it was the later part of the day, and he says, we needed to get someplace different, and we had a time constraint, and I had things I wanted to do beforehand because I knew you and I were going to talk later, and there was a window of time there, and I had told him all this before we left, but as he might be inclined to do, it was just till he needed that moment did he bring it into awareness. And so I said, well, let's go this way. And I like the view that way. And he's like, well, how do you want to go? And I could tell I wanted him to translate. I wanted him to, what my clue to him was, because I didn't say, what my clue that I did say was the view's prettier that way. And he continued on through the dicey, boring stuff to me. And so then I could have percolated, and I did percolate a little bit. I go, damn, he's not getting it. he didn't hear me, right? It was my key. So it was enough for me to say, the view is pretty that way. Cause if he'd been paying attention, he'd be the first one to say, oh yeah, we can go that way. Cause he doesn't care. He doesn't care how he gets there. But he didn't hear the cue. And the cue I gave wasn't necessarily clear. So there's that awareness at play, and how do you pay attention? And a lot of us are not trained or in the mindset to pay attention to the little stuff. And that takes us back, when you go, oh, you never said anything. And I'm like, oh no, I said everything all the way, but it wouldn't be my nature to say, go this way. That's the dictator, So.
So how's that slapping, and how's that arresting? That's actually a very good, how we interact and how we relate to each other. Are we slapping each other, or are we caressing each other when we're making our requests or interacting?
That's a very good point. Yeah. How are we expressing ourselves? And it's like, I have a constant dialogue going on in my head, and I will say something as part of that constant dialogue. And yesterday he was very much, what the hell are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. Where's your frame of reference? And I'm going, well, it was really clear to me because it was just in my stream of, I was thinking about all this, and he hates to talk about all that kind of stuff. So I went, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. It's about this. And he's been excellent since he's retired, and he's around all the time now at catching me to how I do my setup, right? Have some explanation there. So he has context because he's used to being different. And, so it's been fun. If I got on my hard horse about it, I could just keep bashing at it or myself. But I'm like, oh gosh, Janet, okay. You're just in training. That's all. You're just in training.
Well, it's true, because both of you are in a different phase of life now. And so suddenly you're around each other a lot more. Yeah. And it does require a different way of communicating and understanding. And
Yeah.
I've had a lot of couples who've been married for a really long time don't expect that because they've been married for a really long time.
Right. Right.
You know, and but it's completely different than like you're going on vacation with somebody. This isn't a circumstance where you're going on vacation with them. You're in a circumstance where you're actually adjusting new ways of living and being and interacting with each other.
Well, most of us celebrate being self-reliant, right? And then you have two people that are self-reliant, and they've been in environments where they're the one that people call upon, and that changes. That rule set changes. And so now explanation is nice because on both parties, because the other person can go, oh, okay, I can factor that in. But right now you're an unknown entity and I don't know where you're coming from and I can't be helpful, which is what one's intention always is how can I be helpful here? And I think it's just learning how to navigate differently and appreciate your differences and give each other value. And sometimes you have to remind each other of that and do our best to go, how can I make this work for you? Because I think that's what love is for me anyway, because who the hell knows what love is? It's putting the other person first. And even if I've been married 41 years here, I think. What can I do to make him enjoy his life? And that gives me deep pleasure. And that's the way we want to live life. Or that's the way I like to live life, right? Not everybody that has value to. Well, certainly not me and my husband, but in their own life, on your own terms. Oh gosh, don't you love that statement? On my own terms. Yeah. That's terminate or terms.
Well, often people do terminate instead of finding another way of being or interacting.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing how we go off of our own misunderstandings.
Yeah.
And don't want to take the time to think, think it through or think how other people are perceiving or experiencing things.
Well, it's always within ourselves first, right, Joan? I mean, if something happens and everything happens to us individually and collectively, it's up to me to not so much rationalize and reason with myself, but love myself and go, okay, I broke my finger. Rats. Or shit, or whatever the language is, whatever the emotion is running there. And you know that everything's going to be different for a while because that finger's been broken. You can't use your hand the same way. You are going to have to be different. And that period of adjustment can either be very abrupt or it can be very, oh, okay, and how many times do you stab your finger till you get a new body memory that says you can't move your finger that way? I mean, we've all kind of gone there when we've had injuries or things happen. And we can be that with our thoughts. We can have that experience in how we feel about something. We can how we relate to things. There's so many different ways that we are having opportunities. Now, see, I didn't use the word confront. I heard it, but I didn't say that. That we are being challenged, I'm going to reframe that into an opportunity to engage myself differently in my world. Now, I'm not going to judge outside of, the inconvenience of this, as to, whoa, let me breathe here, take a moment. How's the rest of me respond? Because there's that thing in the brain when it has an injury that it calls upon all the other lobes in the brain and stuff happens. Still, you get what you want. You just get there a different way. And I think we're constantly stubbing our fingers and engaging life. And sometimes we just keep stubbing it. And some of us learn pretty quickly that, opportunity. Didn't know I wanted one. Okay, all right, here we go.
I I think we stub our toes and we jam our fingers, but I'm not quite certain. But I understood. Yeah. And, it's we're navigating through life, and I think we make it hard on ourselves when we want to expect people to understand us instead of trying to understand them.
Yeah. So listeners, just notice as you're with us in this time and space, whatever time and space that is, what could just soften a little bit, because as you bring yourself into awareness of being consciousness and whatever language and wordage and procedure you want to do that in, what is different from that slight softening, that slight engaging? You're not having to work against yourself. See, we still value hard work, and the hardest working thing is how we work with ourselves. And so if we can relax that a little bit and we just go, was I clear? And so often we're going to say, yes, I was very clear what I wanted. But then we're forgetting the intention that's behind that or driving that. The other person's picking it up in that state of their awareness. And so could I put that a little different way? Let me back up. How challenging is it for us to back up a minute and go, ooh, okay, because cars don't only go forward, they go sideways, they go backwards, they go front and back, they do all kinds of different things. And so if I don't
go sideways?
Yeah, sure. Maybe not willingly.
Exactly. As they're rolling over, right. They tend to back and forth to go. I mean, when you parallel park, they don't just immediately go sideways into the parking space.
Right. You have to appreciate there's lots of different ways. And if it's not about being wrong or right, it's about, well, what other way could I do this? I don't know. And so as consciousness, something shows up and, it's like, wow, I needed that. And that happened when I needed it. And and what happened is you allowed for something different to show up outside of what your expectation was. And it can happen all the time. And it's a great way to live. And, the slaps of awareness are still present, but it's where it's oriented and how I relate to that is different. So, it's cruising. I like cruising. It's nice, but rapids are nice too, and then smooth water. However, there's lots of different places to be.
And exactly, and people find different ways of cruising or driving to be more enjoyable. Yeah. I used to really enjoy driving a manual transmission. It was fun to do.
Yeah, control,
coordination. Right? Yeah, you felt a little bit more control. Except I have to tell you, trying to drive a manual transmission on the streets of Seattle, which is very hilly, can be kind of exciting when you get stuck at a light.
That's the right word, exciting. Yes.
Exciting. Am I excited rolling backwards? No, I'm not. So, yeah, I remember having my husband driving in the streets of Seattle, and at one point I looked at him and it was like, oh, we both need self-driving cars. That's what we need now. This is no longer fun for me. So, we're adjusting. And so you might not have one way of navigating through life that remains the same way. You might find at a certain point, this isn't fun anymore. I want to do something different.
Well, that was one thing about Tom and I having our drive to where we were going, and me in my awareness of he's right, I'm right. And he said, and I'm like, I know the time. And you wouldn't know that, Joan, but I track time when I go to appointments and things like that. And
I'm amazed. I had no idea.
And I know how long it takes to get someplace, right? And I know how long it takes to get to that part of the place and on the journey. And And he doesn't know all that because he's not used to going there that way. So when we're making a choice of how to get there, I'm not only considering that it looked nice, but what my time element. So there's always more than one way to get someplace usually. And what I found was, he says, well, we'll get there in time. And I'm like, damn, he's right. I don't think he's ever late for anything. But here I spend all this entertainment factor figuring out, and I thought, well, maybe my way wasn't quicker. And I had that moment where I went, well, maybe it is these, maybe Janet, and I went with it. And I went, it's okay if it's proved right or wrong, right? Because at that point I've made that choice when I got there. We got there just in time. I mean, it wasn't just in time. It was like I had a few minutes there. So him and his adventure, but it wasn't visually as entertaining as I might have scripted. But, it's like, well, that's okay. It was important for me to be aware that his way is different and we still wind up at the same place at the same time. And that was really an act of grace and appreciation for me, because I'm like, I know what works for me, and that doesn't mean other people aren't working in their worlds just as well. So
it's interesting how we've meandered just a slightly different version of the topic that we started with, but it makes me realize I mentor and I work with coach people who are, single, they're not in relationship. And it makes me realize how challenging it is if you've not been in relationship for a while to be in relationship and understand exactly what you just expressed and what I was expressing about being with someone who's driving in a different way or who does things in a slightly different way. And there isn't a right or wrong about it. And it doesn't mean that they're not your soulmate. Right. Just because they put the toilet paper going the wrong way.
Do you hear that, gentlemen? There is a right and a wrong way with the toilet paper.
Or that they leave the toilet seat up. Don't they realize how inconsiderate that is?
Well, but from their perspective, having to lift the thing is probably as inconsiderate.
Yes, but we never have to lift the thing. So who's doing the lifting needs to put it back down.
Oh, ooh. That's a thought. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think there's just appreciating. See, and I'm more about appreciating moments in my life, right? And if I can bring more appreciation and kindness and how we hold all this unconscious judgment about things and we skip. The alphabet English alphabet has 26 letters. But so often we say A through Z. And we forget all those other letters in there till we need them. And what happens is that we're shorting ourselves out sometimes by making the leap from A to Z. And in the context and the reference that it's appropriate, when you could be experiencing A, B, C, D, and through the rest. And you can see that it has a sense it takes time. And how much time do I allow myself to hit all those other places? And the challenge is when you just go A to Z, you're missing how you got to Z. And so most, we're working with people all the time that are in Z and they have no idea how they got there. And it's about breaking down the steps of awareness so that awareness can be there and they can go, oh, that's when that was. Oh, and those are those incredible, precious moments to me when I help people get context for where they are in their life, and it's one way of doing. Certainly, it's fine to go to A to Z because you change states of awareness so quickly. But the challenge can be for a person who does that and they don't know how they got there and they can't do it again. And there's that too. So anyway.
Well, Often I find it's also not about replicating what you did before with any success, because what's coming up next requires improvisation. But I have to say, what's coming up next for us is very predictable. We know what's coming next. And in 30 seconds, but I think we'll go ahead and do it now since I initiated it. We have to stop for another commercial break, but stay tuned because we're going to be talking about, is life a slap in the face or a gentle caress of awareness, when we come right back.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath, accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye. Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan. I'm along here with Janet. And we have been talking about, is life a slap in the face or a gentle caress?
What do you think, Joan?
I think it can be slapstick sometimes.
Very good, Jen. I love that. Yeah, it is, isn't it? You fall on your face and then we all laugh and you go, oh God, I did it again, or ooh, that hurts. Right? But it can be very entertaining. That's true. And what's entertaining is that we picture ourselves in that position. So, it's interesting. Slapstick, that's it. That's right.
My husband and I have gotten into watching the original Star Trek.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And the fighting is hilarious. It is so staged, and it's like the fists are there to just kind of go past the face. And there is a technique in stage fighting where you do that, where the fist goes past the face, and the person who's supposedly being punched, they clap their hands at the same time, so it sounds like you're hit in the face.
I see. Yes.
So, but it is kind of slapsticky at the same time. So wouldn't life be different if you approached it as a staged experience?
Well, I think that's kind of, so the word comes feigning, F-E-I-G-H, or what is?
To feign something, right.
Yeah. When they make their move and it's, and from that angle of observation, it looks like it connected. But if you're in a different angle, you can see that it's not connecting. And that's what the way the martial artist works, right? He doesn't let something come right at him. He moves and uses that energy and turns it on itself. And I think that's what we want to become better at, is realizing the mindset that this is just a play. It's just creative. So the attachment to what kind of story are you telling? And are the characters well written? And is there enough action and feeling in it that engages you? I mean, all the elements that go into great storytelling. And how you observe that dance between how someone feels and how they express and how it's received and how it's sent back. I mean, it's all about engagement. And so how are we engaging in life? We don't have to be hit in order to feel what a hit is like. I don't think you can feel it in different textures and tones and sounds and, or once you've been hit, you know what that is and you can pull on it again. So the next time it doesn't have to be like that. You can just, this is where I feel this. And you're just tapping into your different realities and dancing, and there's where the lightness of being shows up, and it goes through things that can have such depth of feeling to them and of any kind. And it's how you relate in that, how you stay there and perhaps revel in it for a little bit. And reveling can be in a second or a moment, or it can be a lifetime, right? I'm not in a place to judge how you express yourself and how you feel. What I am into, and what I know you're into, and what those of us who do this work are about, is that get what you want and get back out. Because then you can do something else. You can feel something else. We don't judge what this is. We're just saying, how long do you need in this opportunity of this experience? And okay, how about when do you want to engage something else? Oh, you want to stay here and engage it this way? Okay. Let's just be here and see what we notice. I mean, it's just a different way of enjoying the dance between consciousness and self is consciousness, and consciousness really wise, and either keeping it from itself or however we got it organized,
Yes. Speaking of organization.
Thank you, Joan.
Bringing this back to some form of structure. I want to invite people to visit us after the show. If you want to know more about us, if you like these, they're not videos, what are they? Recordings. If you want to listen to the rest of our podcasts, they are all on our website, consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. Our podcasts are there, our blogs. Janet and I write completely different blogs on there. You can learn more about our sessions. Janet and I do sessions for people all around the world via Skype and Zoom and by phone. You can also find out about our meetups, and Janet does hers in her lovely home in Portland on Tuesdays and on Thursdays, and I do mine all around the Puget Sound. I was just in Seattle this weekend. I'm going to be in Tacoma next weekend, and you can find out the details to those on our website. You can also connect to us by social media. If you're on Twitter, we're on Twitter at Joan and Janet on Twitter. And if you're on Facebook, there's links to our Facebook pages. Jan and I each have Facebook pages, and the show has Facebook pages. And guess what that one is? Conscious Conversations with JoanandJanet.com. And we're also on YouTube, and all the podcasts are on our YouTube channel. And I have a YouTube channel myself, and I post my videos on our website. So you can go to Conscious Conversations with JoanandJanet.com to find out about that. Do you want to tell them about your groups, by the way?
Oh, you can always join me on Thursdays via Zoom, a video conferencing, so you can do it over your cell or computer or whatever device you might have handy. And it's live interactive, usually for an hour, hour and a half. It depends on how many people show up, with people from all over everywhere who are not local in my house who want to meet and play with as consciousness in real time. And you can contact me at our website, show website, or my website, my email address at janetb@janetandbeyond.com, and ask for the registration packet. And we'll get you all connected and meet a wonderful group of people. It's small. It's totally dictated by what shows up within those that show up and whatever else we notice in the world. So please consider joining us. And that's 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. Pacific time. Always Pacific.
Cool.
So,
cool. And you have people from all over the place calling in.
yeah, New Zealand and Texas and California and Colorado Springs, and consciousness lurks everywhere. And it's
consciousness lurks.
It's lurking. It lurks within each of us. It's just waiting to play. So that's what we do with this show. And for all you listeners out there, thank you so very much for being present with us and noticing what shifts that you feel when you join us here. So
we do appreciate you contributing to our morphic field regardless of what time and space that you're listening. And we invite you to tune in next week. Same time, same channel.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
You've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And thanks so much for helping to co-create the show, no matter if you're listening live or on demand. You energetically contribute to our collective experience. Joan and Janet love to hear from you and invite you to email your comments and ideas for them to explore each week. Contact them at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Tune in next week for another great show, and until then, keep enjoying this wonderful adventure we call life.